SP?
Perfect. That's a great question. So are you in Canada?
No. Right now I'm in India.
Okay, so you can't apply until you're in Canada and have your permanent address in BC. So once you get here, we'll help you. The international office will help you with that process. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you for that. And for those of you who are in Canada but online, you can stay and we'll show you where the online application is. But once you do not fill the online application out unless you're actually in British Columbia. So not even like if you're in Toronto, it's not okay. All right, so I'm going to introduce to you Jen Smith, our Employment Services Coordinator?
Yeah, that works.
No, what is it?
It's Co-op and Employment Services Coordinator.
So close.
Close.
Jen, do you help any of the other campuses with co-op or just?
I help other campuses with practicum.
Okay.
Which is a version of co-op.
Okay.
Kind of.
So we're going to hand it over to Jen to present. And are there any questions in here before we get started?
I had already applied for the employment.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I'm already applied for the employment.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Okay, so I am just going to start sharing. Show. I'm beginning. And we're going to record, or we're still recording, okay. And it's all good. Thanks, Jen.
All right. Hi, everyone. So this is a lot of information to take in a short time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over my PowerPoint, and I'm going to be referring to what I call the employment workbook, and everybody is going to be emailed the employment workbook and a copy of the PowerPoint, so you'll be able to go back and review everything. Some of you might have resumes and cover letters and jobs lined up, but if you don't get too overwhelmed by all this, and remember that you can make an appointment with me either in person or online at any time, and I can help you with your resume, cover letter, job search, a number of different things. So we're going to get started. And can I just hit that? Oh, okay.
Cutting you short.
All right. So first thing, finding a job in Canada. I would imagine that most of you are going to want to find a part-time job to keep you going. There's lots of different options that you're going to have. There's a ton of jobs right now in Cranbrook, and I'm sure there's just as many in the regional campuses too. People are really desperate to hire right now. So some things to remember when you're looking for a job in Canada is to use a Canadian formatted resume. We don't use tables here, and we've got some information that you might think is relevant, but it actually isn't, and I will go over that. Most businesses are going to require a resume and a cover letter, and we'll go over all that. You're going to customize your resume to the type of job that you're seeking, and you're going to have to take some time to learn about your new community so that you can be aware of what's going on, and it will just help you with that interview process. Networking is going to help you get a lot of these jobs. So like ask your friends, your roommates, whatnot that might already be here, where they might be working. And you're always going to submit a cover letter unless they say no cover letter. I know cover letters are something that a lot of you might not have had to do before. So they are the ones that seem to cause the most stress. And remember, always ask for help. That's what I'm here for, is to help you. So you can always make an appointment with me. So there are jobs on the internet and Indeed, and the college has a brand new job board called Experience Cotter. There is information in the employment workbook with a whole bunch of links to different websites, as well as a whole page that on the last page that talks about the Experience Cotter portal, and in there is your job board. And if you're going to be doing a course that requires practicum, you're also going to be going into that portal to track your practicum work. So it's something to get familiar with. And right now there's quite a few jobs on there, so it's definitely worth checking out. And there's also a bulletin board outside of the gym on the Cranbrook campus that has printed out job postings. And in the other campuses, check with the admin there to see where you guys might have a job board as well. Cold calling is one way that you might actually go out and try to find jobs, and that's a great way to do it. But make sure to phone first, ask some questions, because you want to make sure that you're making that best impression when you do so. And be prepared to speak about yourself. They might just do a little mini interview right on the spot. So you want to make sure that you are prepared to talk about yourself. Oh, why am I going backwards? So the Canadian resume, you're definitely going to include your international work experience and your education, any relevant skills, and you're going to tailor your resume to the job that you're applying for, and you're most likely going to have to write a cover letter. You do not need to include personal information, your age, your gender, marital status, religion, social insurance number, like your Canadian one. You do not put that on your resume. Your study work permit info, you do not put that on your resume, and you don't need to put your picture. So our resumes are very much just all about your work experience, your education, and listing of your skills, and then of course some references. So this is an example of a Canadian resume. There are templates in the workbook. There's a couple of different ones that you can use as templates. Plus, of course, the internet is full, just chock full of templates, but always remember that these templates are guidelines. Try to find a nice simple one that has lots of room for you to make sure you're highlighting your dates, and you've got your personal profile, your education, your work experience, and of course, some references. So we're just gonna go over a few of the sections in the resume, just to bring a few things to your attention. So your contact info seems pretty straightforward. One of the big things with your contact info is make sure you have a professional email. You don't want it to be too silly because you're applying for a job. And you also want to make sure that you have a nice professional voicemail so that if they phone you because they want to offer you an interview, they know right away that they've contacted you. Your personal profile, now not everybody's is going to look the same, specifically because we all have different experiences. Some of us have had lots of jobs. Some of us might have only had one job, but you've got lots of schooling. So we're all going to have different things in our personal profile, or you could even call it your professional profile, a summary of qualifications, key skills, abilities. This section can be in point form, or it could be a small little, like 2-sentence little paragraph at the top. It's up to you what you're most comfortable with and how you want to talk about what you have to offer. In your education, you want to make sure that you list your education chronologically. You want to start, of course, with College of the Rockies because you want them to know that you are going to school here. You are going to include your education from your home country because you want them to know how much of a hard worker you are, what kind of experience you have behind you. You don't need to list any dates for high school. Listing when you graduated high school gives away your age because they can kind of figure it out. So you don't want to list your high school date simply because you don't want them to discriminate against you if you're really young or if you're really old. Any certifications that you might have that might be needed for that job, you want to make sure you list those. So first aid or serving it right, or WMIS is another one that is often required for jobs. And they will be all listed in the job description if you actually need them. So for your work experience, same thing with the work experience. You want to list it in chronological order, so the newest at the top. You want it to be clear and concise. You definitely want to use really good language. You don't want to use too many words because you just want to say something like, great customer service. You don't want to go into, I served coffee, tea, biscuits. Like, you don't want to list it all. You want it to be clear and concise. You only need to talk about maybe 3 things, 3 responsibilities that you had in that job. You don't want too much information. And you want your dates to the far right. So formatting is really important. And so having your dates for your education and your work experience to the far right on your page is really going to make it really easy for the employer to see how often you've been working, how often you've been in school. So it's a really good indicator of how hard of a worker you are. And remember that there's lots of examples in that employment workbook. So refer to that. There's notes and tips and tricks in there as well. Volunteer experience. So maybe you haven't been working at all, or you're really interested in getting more involved in Canada. Volunteering is an excellent way to start to get to know your community. Volunteering is going to give you some great info to put on your resume. It's going to help you accumulate volunteer hours, which could help you apply for bursaries and scholarships. And it's really just going to show that you're dedicated to being in this community. You're really interested in learning more. And there's a ton of different types of volunteer opportunities out there, working with SPCA or working with maybe like a literacy group. There's a ton of different opportunities. So there is volunteer opportunities listed in the experience portal.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just have a question.
Sure.
Jen, we have a question in Golden.
Hey, what is it? I can't, I'm like all disorientated.
Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. If we do volunteering and part-time work, will our volunteering hours be taken out of our part-time work hours?
Ooh, I've never been asked that. Maybe Kathleen knows.
This is a really gray area. Anything that somebody would be paid for is considered work. That's the legal definition by IRCC, even though we do encourage volunteering. As you're on a study permit and have regulations, be very, very careful, because if something like, you can't volunteer in a shoe store because it's your uncle and you just want to help, because that's taking a job away from someone else. So be really careful with volunteer experience. I would say like a one-off event that you help with is lovely, but check, yeah.
If it's advertised as only a volunteer position, there's no way anyone would ever be paid for it.
Right. And it's, but still, you can work off campus, but I would still watch your hours just to be safe. Always err on the side of caution. If something is up for interpretation, then imagine they're going to interpret it in the worst way. They do, yeah. And you don't want to get stuck. So
Imagine it's not going to work in your favor.
Great answer. So references. Biggest thing about references is always ask for permission to use someone as a reference. At this point, you might need to use someone from your home country as a reference, and that's okay. Just make sure that you're going to give some information about time zones, the opportunity to email them, and give whoever you're going to use as a reference, give them a big heads up that you're applying for jobs in Canada. And you can even send them the job description so that when they do get the email, they know exactly what's going on, where you are, what kind of a job that you're applying for, because then they'll be able to give you the best reference possible. So some general tips, action words. So the action words are in the employment workbook, and they're just some really great words to help you strengthen your your descriptions of your work experience or your volunteer experience, just to help you communicate better. Write in first person. Spelling mistakes are not tolerated. Use spell check. Give it to someone to read over, because spell check is not going to catch absolutely everything. So make sure you use multiple different ways of catching those spelling mistakes. And as well for your grammar, use 11 or 12 point font. Maximum you want to have 2 pages. It is okay to have a 1-page resume. That just means it's easier to read. Templates are guidelines. Just remember that. Don't just find a template and start dumping things in and trying to make up things to fill in their subcategories, because you might not even need to use that subcategory. Make sure that you can back up everything that you write on your resume. If you're writing it down, that means you have a story you can tell about it. You can talk about when it happened, what were the results, why it happened. So make sure you can back up everything. And I can't stress proofreading enough. Proofread, proofread, proofread for both your resume and your cover letter. So the cover letter is often requested to go with your resume, and we're just going to go over a little bit about cover letters. So you're going to write a cover letter to showcase more about you and why they should hire you. So a cover letter is just a great way to tell your story, get them more excited about why they should hire you, more explanation of what you have to offer. And it's just connecting the dots between you, the qualification, and the job. It doesn't have to be big. It's just like 3 little paragraphs max. It looks very much like a business letter. There's a ton of examples in the employment workbook on the format, on do's and don'ts, because there, it can be very tough to write. It's really hard to talk about ourselves, in a really positive manner sometimes. So you might have to do multiple drafts before you have something that you're really happy with. So you don't want, some of the big don'ts is you don't want to just put, sir or madam. You definitely want to see if you can find out who to address the letter to. And lots of times that kind of information is in that job description. The job description is going to have almost every little detail that you need to know. And that's what you want to use to help map out what you're going to talk about. And this is really how simple it really needs to be. It's not a big letter. It's just that extra little bit of info that you couldn't put in your resume. So interviews. How am I doing for time? I forgot to look.
It's 25 to 12. It's another 10 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So interviews, just a few key things to think about. You want to prepare, you want to practice, you want to participate, and you want to be positive. All these things are going to come into play. You might be way more nervous because you've never applied for a job in a new country before. So, taking that time to really get yourself ready is going to make a big difference. Ahead of time, do some research about the company. And the biggest thing is know yourself. You have to be comfortable about talking about your strengths and weaknesses. You want to be able to walk in and tell them about how awesome you are. And there's some exercises in the employment workbook to help you think about those strengths and those weaknesses so that you can get comfortable talking about them. So practice, there is an infinite amount of practice interview questions. on the internet. There is no reason why anybody should say, I didn't know how to prepare. All you have to do is Google interview questions for a waitress job, interview questions for a grocery store job, interview questions for a dog sitter. There is so many questions that are out on the internet. You can always practice. That's what you have friends and family for, or you can make an appointment with me and we can do mock interviews and we can practice that way. So you have a ton of options. And participate. When you go to an interview, you're not just sitting there waiting for them, to ask you questions. You need to participate. So you have to think about, what are you going to wear? You want to smile, of course, because you want them to be excited to talk to you. You want to be polite. And you want to have questions with you. Always, think ahead. What kind of questions could you bring with you? So an example would be, what kind of training will I receive if you offer me the job? Or how many people will be working on the team that I would be part of? Would I have to work weekends? How late is the latest shift go? There's a ton of questions that you could have prepared. Having them prepared is really going to show that you want to communicate them. It's a great way to just get to know them a little bit more, because they're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them as well. Because just because they offer you a job doesn't mean you have to take it. You could decide after the interview, you know what, this is not the job that I want. And so then you would politely decline the position. Which goes to being positive. You want to walk in there positive. So, you've taken time, you found exactly what you want to wear, you've practiced all your interview questions, you've read about the company, you've got some fun socks on to give you some extra confidence, you've got your questions, you go in there and you're going to be positive. The more you practice, the more you put into getting ready for the interview, the more positive you're going to be, because you're going to be so confident, especially if it's a job that you super duper want. And maybe it's a job that you're not sure that you want, you still want to go in positive. Every interview is a great experience, whether you get the job or not, because that's how we learn and that's how we practice. Some tips and tricks for your interviews. You want to listen carefully. Don't rush to answer. They don't expect you to answer instantly. You have that time to take a breath, gather your thoughts, and then ask the question. You want to give a good concrete example. It's okay to be nervous. Everybody's nervous in an interview. Ask for clarification if you don't understand. It's okay to ask, can you please repeat that question again? Or, maybe you didn't quite understand the context of the question. Can you please clarify something? Don't exaggerate in your answers. Remember, they're going to be calling your references, so, they can easily catch you on exaggerating. Don't be negative. You always want to answer the question with a positive. Even if it's a question like, why did you leave your last job? Maybe you really didn't like your boss, but you still have to answer with a positive. You don't tell them you didn't like your boss. You tell them that you thought, I learned all that I could there, and now I'm looking for a new life experience, right? So you don't tell them about the horrible things. You talk about the positive things. It's okay to ask for a question to be repeated, or maybe can we leave that question to the very end, just because it's going to take more time for you to come up with an answer. And always have those questions prepared to ask the employer. So that was a lot of stuff. So just like that, you have your resume, your cover letter, you're ready for that interview. There's a ton of info in what you're going to get emailed. The job description truly is the map to getting it all right. It's going to tell you all the info you need, what skills you need to highlight in your resume, your cover letter. That job description is really great to making you find the info to make yourself stand out. Go through the workbook, make an appointment with me. It's really easy. And there's a tutorial to even how to make an appointment if you don't already know how to do it. And then check out the experience portal. You log in with your student number and then at cotr.bc.ca. There's going to be posters all over campus with the URL code so you can just scan it in. There's tons of jobs in there right now. So really, I highly recommend that you get used to going in there because, you know, even when you get closer to graduating and you're going to start thinking about what kind of career path, it's always good to just read through job descriptions to see what skills they're looking for, what kind of education they're looking for. So it's going to play a role in your post-secondary journey. And then especially if you're going to be doing any programs that require practicum, you will be getting lessons on how to use it to track your practicum placement. So it just depends what program that you're in. Yep. Go for it.
Jen, it's Karen and Golden. Just point of clarity, this employment workbook that you're referencing, you're going to be sending that out to all of the students?
Yep.
Okay, great. Just
and they'll get the PowerPoint as well.
super. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that's it. So any questions? Yeah.
We both tried to go to the experience portal.
Yeah.
Phone, computer, different browsers, and it didn't work. Like, do you know if it's like currently?
It should work.
Anyone tried it? Not either.
So can I go on the internet for a sec?
You can, and we'll have to share again.
Yeah.
Your login information and it lost. Yeah.
So